Welcome to 8th House Portal. Today's topic is all about red flags when you are in a new relationship. New love, but seeing old patterns, seeing who someone really is, because you never really know who a person is until you see their choices. And this episode isn't about shaming sexuality, but it's about integrity, boundaries, and what you are no longer willing to tolerate. Let me tell you a story. Mary noticed it the way you notice a smell in a room before you can name it. She and Alan were at his office happy hour. Plastic cups, bad lighting, everyone a little louder than usual. He'd introduced her as my girlfriend for the first time. The word had warmed her chest like a small sun. Then his colleague walked in. Sophie, marketing, loose hair, bright laugh, red lipstick that looked like it had somewhere better to be. Mary watched as Sophie floated over to Alan, hand landing on his forearm like they had done this 100 times. She leaned in close to say something, lips brushing near his ear, perfume hitting Mary from a few feet away. Alan laughed, head tipping back, not moving her hand, not shifting an inch to create space. Mary's grip tightened on her cup. It wasn't that he was doing anything outrageous. No touching back, no whispering. It was that he wasn't doing anything at all to change the flavor of the moment. Sophie joked, her eyes flicking up and down his shirt as if she were praising it. She swatted his shoulder playfully. He just smiled, easy, relaxed, letting it happen. A couple of colleagues watched, smirks passing between them. Someone nudged the guy next to him. Mary caught the gesture. Heat crawled up her neck. When Alan finally turned and pulled her a little closer, arm around her waist, it was after a full minute of that energy hanging in the air. "This is Mary," he said, cheerful, "my girlfriend." Sophie's eyes flicked over briefly. "Oh, I've heard about you," she said. "He never shuts up about how amazing you are," she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must be special. He usually keeps his options open." A couple of people laughed. Mary forced a smile back, something polite and tight. On the walk home, Alan chatted away about work, drama, and the project he'd been assigned. Mary nodded in the right places, but her mind replayed Sophie's hand on his arm again and again. He'd said nothing. He'd moved nothing. He'd let the moment stand, uncorrected. In the quiet of her apartment later, Mary sat at her kitchen table with a mug of tea gone lukewarm, staring at the wood grain. The old Mary, the one from a few relationships ago, knew exactly what she would have done. Swallow it, rationalize it, maybe make a small joke. Then spend nights scrolling through Sophie's profile, comparing, shrinking. But something in her life had shifted. She'd promised herself after the last heartbreak that she would no longer abandon herself in the name of being cool. She realized she was in the blackening stage, when the lie you're living can't stay hidden anymore. How the first step in transformation is letting everything that isn't real fall apart. She realized she was in one of those small, blackening moments now. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just a crack in the surface where truth was seeping through. "I feel disrespected," she admitted quietly to the empty room. The words landed like a stone in a still pond. Then came the second voice in her head, quick and sharp. "Don't be so sensitive. It was just a bit of flirting. You look controlling if you bring it up. Men don't like women who are jealous." That was the old programming talking. The Mary who tolerated too much because she was afraid of being alone again. The Mary who'd watched her own father flirt with waitresses while her mother pretended not to notice. She put a hand on her chest and closed her eyes. What's really happening here, she asked herself. Beyond the story, beyond Sophie, beyond Alan. Images rose up. Sophie's hand, Alan's stillness, the colleague's smirks, her own body tensing. It wasn't about policing Alan's every interaction. It was about the container. Morally, she believed that when you say yes to someone, you also say yes to protecting the space between you, especially in public. Not perfection, not paranoia. Just, I don't invite flirtation that disrespects my partner. Psychologically, she knew what it signaled when a man let flirtation wash over him without shifting his posture, without a small move of recalibration towards his woman. It often meant he enjoyed the ego hit. He was used to being the center of feminine tension. A part of him still liked having open tabs, even if he claimed commitment. She'd come to see flirtation as more than just banter. It was energy exchange, chords, invitations, portals. Alan stood there and let someone else plug into him, in front of her, without consciously redirecting that current. You could call it small, but energy rarely lied. Mary opened up her journal and drew one line down the page. On the left, she wrote, "If I ignore this." On the right, "If I honor this." Under the left, she wrote, "I feel crazy and needy. I watch him more than I feel him. I start to shrink when I say when something bothers me. I relive my mother's silence." And under the right side, she wrote, "I risk discomfort. I show him who I really am and what I need. I might lose him sooner, but I won't lose me. I give the relationship a chance to be honest." She sat back. The choice looked almost embarrassingly clear on paper. In alchemical terms, this was albedo, the whitening, the washing, the separating of what was hers, her values, boundaries, from what was his choices, his character. She couldn't control his side, only hers. That weekend, they met for brunch. Sunlight pooled on the table between them, catching the edge of their coffee cups. "Alan," she began, hands flat on the wood, voice calm but steady, "I want to talk about something from the other night." He looked up, wary and attentive at the same time. "Okay." "When Sophie was flirting with you," she said, not rushing the words, "and you didn't move away or change the tone or even look at me, my body felt really disrespected." He opened his mouth, closed it. "Mary, it was nothing. She's just like that with everyone." "I hear that," Mary nodded, "and I'm not blaming you for her behavior. I'm looking at yours. I noticed you didn't signal any boundary. You didn't show in your body that you're in a relationship. That matters to me." He frowned, defenses rising. "So what, I'm not allowed to talk to any women at work now?" She felt that familiar urge to backpedal, to say, no, it's fine, never mind. Instead, she took a breath. "I'm not asking you to avoid women," she said softly. "I'm asking if you want to be the kind of man who protects our container. That's a non-negotiable for me. If another woman is clearly flirting, I need my partner to be awake enough to gently close the door." He leaned back, chewing that over. Silence stretched. Mary held herself steady, not filling it with nervous jokes. Inside, something trembled. Her old fear of being too much, the risk that he'd call her dramatic and start leaving slowly. But beneath the tremble was something else, a quiet, fierce pride. This was rubedo, trying to be born, the reddening, the moment where inner truth turns into actual behavior. Finally, Alan sighed. Honestly, I liked the attention, he admitted, eyes dropping. I didn't think about what it looked like. I'm not used to anyone calling me on that. My last girlfriend pretended not to see things like that. Or she'd explode later. I'm not exploding, Mary said. I'm telling you in real time, so we can see if we're actually compatible in how we do commitment. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. I don't want you to feel disrespected. I can be more conscious. Next time I'll step back or put an arm around you, or just shut it down. And if I slip, I want you to tell me again. Don't disappear. Relief rushed in. It came cautiously, on tiptoe. Mary knew this was not a magic fix. This was a data point. In the coming weeks, she watched, not in paranoia, but in awareness. Once at another work event, she saw Sophie approach again. This time, when her hand landed on Alan's arm, he laughed and took half a step back, angling his body so Mary was in the circle. Hey, this is my girlfriend Mary, he said quickly, drawing Mary in with a hand at the small of her back. The flirtation died on impact, redirected into something lighter, more friendly. Sophie's eyes flicked, evaluated, adjusted. Mary's body exhaled. Another time, a different woman at a bar tried the same game. Alan grinned, polite but distant, then turned back to Mary within seconds. No lingering, no smirk in the woman's direction once Mary looked away. Not perfect, but different. If he hadn't responded, if he'd mocked or minimized her feelings, she knew what the next step would have been. The version of her that honored the sacredness of her own field would have walked away. Not to punish, to protect her temple. But for now, she stayed, not because she was afraid to leave, but because something in him was choosing to rise and meet her. That night, alone in her room, Mary lit a candle and whispered a quiet thank you to herself, to whatever listened to every old version of her that had kept quiet so that this one could finally speak. In that soft glow, she understood what the alchemists meant when they said the real stone wasn't gold at all. It was the solid, steady feeling of standing in your own truth while you love. Whoever stays in your life after that stays by choice. Whoever leaves frees space for something cleaner. And as she blew the candle out, Mary knew in this new relationship she was not only learning who Alan was, she was finally seeing who she was. The problem with situations like this story, what happens if you ignore that behavior? That was happening right in front of Mary, the flirtation, right in front of her. So what happens when she's not around? You can only imagine, right? Because you can't be with him all the time. And always remember, it takes two to tango, right? I don't want this episode to be about judging people. It's more about awareness, self-protection, and understanding what certain behaviors may reveal about readiness, maturity, and alignment. Sometimes red flags are often subtle. They're not dramatic. And what we may tolerate early on in a relationship becomes our future reality. Everyone has different standards for loyalty, respect, and exclusivity. And conflict can happen when unspoken values clash. I will say this: behaviors are signals of priorities. Early on in relationships, you are reading patterns. And you might be asking yourself, does this person's behavior match the level of commitment they say they want? Is this other person you're dating, are they keeping doors open to other men or women that basically have them in a half-available mode? Some of the red flags that I'm going to bring up in this episode. I don't want the episode to be extremely long, but they are red flags I've seen colleagues, friends go through, and as well as experience them myself. And these are some of the ones that I find most annoying. And so these are the ones that I will go over today. So the first one I wanted to bring up was red flag number 1, keeping phone numbers. Phone numbers of access, basically it's access to casual or explicit contacts. Why do you want ongoing access to people? So keeping phone numbers of contacts who could be casual or explicit. So is that person aligned with loyalty, respect, and the sacredness in sex? Or is it just having endless options and entertainment? What is that? What is the point of keeping phone numbers of individuals? Does the behavior of keeping these phone numbers align with the type of relationship you want? So you could look at this as, what are the possible reasons that a person, I usually find, I'll be honest, from what I've seen, in life, whether it's through family, friends, colleagues, or my own experience, most of what I've seen and experienced is usually men that have a lot of these red flags that come up. I'm not saying women don't, they do, but it's mostly been men. And so during this episode, you may hear me say he a lot. And that just could be because of my experiences or from what I've viewed. So then the question becomes like, why are these individuals keeping these phone numbers of people, or if they are interested in women, phone numbers of women who are known to be promiscuous? Is this because they need validation? They enjoy being desired by others? Is there a fear of losing options? Is this desirability tied to your ego? Or is this like needing backup attention? Maybe the person doesn't perceive the emotional impact that it's having on the new relationship. There are studies out there, quite a lot of studies, and I will try to link some of them that I've gone over. But there's a study that looked at the male and female differences. There is a study I'll look at briefly by Jeffrey Simpson and Stephen Gangstad called Sociosexuality and Romantic Partner Choice. And they looked at the male and female differences, and that was one of the most important aspects of the study. So sociosexuality is not just about sexual behavior. It reflects comfort with uncommitted sex, desire for sexual variety, attitudes toward exclusivity, and also psychological orientation toward mating. And what they found was that most of the findings, men on average scored higher in unrestricted sociosexuality than women. And what does that mean? It means that men are statistically more open to casual sex and report a greater desire for sexual variety. They are also more willing to engage without emotional commitment. And this isn't something I'm making up, okay? It came from a study, but it's been seen over and over again in psychology, the same pattern. I believe there was another study done, evidence-based work. It was a large cross-cultural study, and it was international, actually. And they studied thousands of participants across different countries, and the consistent results showed that men showed more unrestricted sociosexuality in nearly every culture studied. So we know that this is a highly reliable psychological pattern. But why does that occur? Like, why do the researchers think that that happens? They think that it has to do with the different reproductive risks that are faced by males versus females. So for women, historically, there are higher biological costs of reproduction, pregnancy burden, childbearing demands. There's a higher weighting of stability and resources. And then for men, there was a greater openness to sexual variety. There was higher average unrestricted sociosexuality. So, I mean, you can always read through that yourself, but that information does influence partner preferences. And when we go back to this study here by Simpson and Gangstad, they found that sociosexual orientation predicts what traits people prioritize. So restricted orientation, it was more common among women, with a higher evaluation of loyalty, reliability, emotional warmth, and parenting potential. And then when we look at men, there was more of an orientation, unrestricted orientation to a higher evaluation of physical attractiveness, sexual accessibility, social visibility. So that research can help explain the repeated tensions, that we may feel in relationships, like the differences in comfort with flirtation, or the different reactions to attractive so-called friends that the other person may have. Other things that could come up in relationship dynamics are, conflicts with ex-partners, or these disagreements about boundaries, because these partners may be operating from different socio-sexual orientations. And it can happen unconsciously. Like, they may not realize this is why they're doing it. They may not realize, oh, they're keeping this friend's phone number because of these underlying psychological traits, right? But one of the most repeated findings in relationship psychology, it seems, is that men on average tend to be more unrestricted in sociosexuality than women. So they are more open to casual sexual connections and sexual variety. Women tend to prioritize more emotional connection and stability. So when we look at these studies, it can really kind of give us more insight into attraction patterns, jealousy triggers, like why is this person being jealous, boundary conflicts, perceived red flags. I'm going to be very honest. I really didn't need to read research studies to know that it's mostly men that have this behavior, because I've seen it. I've seen it in colleagues, friends, family, in my own life. But there are those people that do need, like, I need a research. We need research to see if this is real. But the research also helps you understand more intricately where this is really coming from, right? So if we take the example of, let's say you're in a new relationship with a man, and like, why is he keeping these phone numbers? Especially a phone number of a woman that is not only attractive, but sexually available, and everyone knows it. Why would you keep that phone number? Is it because there's difficulty with depth or true intimacy? Is there still immaturity around closure and self-control? Is it because he likes to get the attention? Or maybe he wants connection but fears full commitment, so he keeps doors opened? Okay. Every phone number or DM is an energetic cord or potential portal. A person who keeps many of these alive is scattering life force, keeping their field crowded, so they're less able to choose you with a clean heart, focused heart. And you can ask yourself this question: do I feel like I'm in a clear two-person container, or like I'm entering someone's crowded, energetic hallway? There is research out there. Like I said, there's a lot of research on relationship dynamics, but there is some research there that talks about mate backup psychology. So keeping potential alternatives psychologically available. Not necessarily acting, but preserving possibility. So that is highly relevant to commitment dynamics. So when your partner is looking at you and you're telling her that you've got this person's phone number and that person's phone number, that's sending a message. Why do you need that person's phone number? And you'll get all types of excuses, right? Well, I work with them. I have to keep their phone number, right? It's part of my job. Really? Don't you have a secretary that keeps all of that? Why do you need that in your phone? So here's some questions for both men and women, because I do know women that have also behaved in that manner, right? It's not just men. But what purpose does maintaining this contact serve in your present life? If there were truly no psychological value, would the connection still exist? Would you feel fully neutral if your partner maintained identical contacts? Let's say you're a man and you've got female friends that you've got in your phone book there, in your contacts in your phone. And they're very attractive, very sexual. What if your new girlfriend, had the same thing going on? Maybe she's got Jason Momoa's phone number and they talk all the time because that's what you do, don't you? How would you feel? Another question you could ask, is this about connection, politeness, nostalgia, or optionality? Does preserving possibility differ from preserving friendship? Just sit quietly with those questions and see where it takes you. So let's go to red flag number 2. Staying in casual contact with exes. There may be reasons. Are there ties, like legitimate ties? Do they share children or a business? Is there a long history with clear boundaries? Versus, are they just checking in? Is there flirtatious banter? Late night talks while you're in a new relationship? You can ask yourself, is that contact transparent, respectful, and minimal? Or is it secretive and emotionally charged, or defended with hostility when questioned? There is a possibility that people do keep exes close for fear of being alone, or maybe as an emotional safety net. There could be unresolved grief, maybe like a need for validation, like you're still wanted by someone, and difficulty fully committing to their present partner. And what that shows is emotional indecision and possible emotional affair dynamics. Because when you have exes and you're still in contact with them and you don't need to be, that equals unfinished contracts and cords. And if that person won't close or cleanly redefine that bond, they are not fully available in this lifetime chapter. And if it's a man doing that, where they're keeping ties with their exes, does this man look like he can close doors with love, or does he live with a trail of half-opened ones? Staying in contact with exes, there's an emotional bond that didn't dissolve immediately after breakup. There's also that familiar attachment, that pull. And there is research that shows that, right? Like you can use attachment theory. People remain psychologically tied to exes when there was a prior investment, right? It can reflect this residual attachment, like I said, the emotional safety net and difficulty with closure. And again, there are studies that go over things like this. And some of those studies show that continued contact with exes correlates to lower commitment to new partners. So don't come into a relationship and tell me that you're all in when you're still talking to your ex and you don't really need to. It has been proven, even though I didn't need to read the research, that there is a lower commitment to the new partner. Not all the time, but that can also increase jealousy in that new relationship, right? Some of the questions you might want to ask yourself, whether you are dating a man or a woman that is still in contact with exes or vice versa. What function does this relationship serve that cannot be met elsewhere? Is that bond informational, logistical, emotional, or nostalgic? Would losing that bond create discomfort? Does that connection to your ex strengthen or complicate your present attachment? And if you were to be fully transparent with the other person in your life, would that feel effortless? Another question you could ask is, who benefits from the continued contact? Does it create any subtle instability or comparison energy? Are there unresolved attachments? Let's move on to red flag number 3. She's just a friend, right? Women do this too, but most of the time I've seen men do this. So what if you suppose that there was a healthy opposite sex friendship? Let's pretend. Let's say you're with a guy who has just a friend, or many of those just friends. You know about her. Maybe you've met her. Boundaries appear clear. There doesn't seem to be any secret flirting that you know of, or late night emotional intimacy talks behind your back. Let's pretend that that's a healthy version. And then we can go to the red flag version where she's hidden, she's minimized, or defended aggressively. They have private jokes, there's emotional oversharing, and sexual tension is denied. Let's be honest, sometimes that just a friend is a backup partner. What is that person's ego not willing to let go of? If that man's new girlfriend behaved with just a friend the way he does, would he be okay with that? Let's go into energy, right? Emotional triangulation will fracture the relationship field. And you could feel that as subtle jealousy that won't resolve. You could feel it as confusion, a sense of not being the only chosen one, even if nothing happened physically that you're aware of. And I'll say it again, I don't need to look for research. I've seen it and experienced it, but there is quite a bit of research on this. Men and women often perceive cross-sex friendships differently. So men tend to be more likely to report latent attraction. There's sometimes an overestimation of reciprocal interest. And there are asymmetrical romantic undercurrents. It doesn't mean that friendships are fake, but ambiguity is common. So some questions you could ask yourself or the other person are, how would you describe the emotional boundary of this friendship? Would that dynamic remain identical if physical attraction were absent? Does that connection carry exclusivity traits? What if your partner's identical friendship feels harmless? Is there any unspoken tension? So when you have secrecy, defensiveness, blurred boundaries, they are meaningful signals. Energy and intention matter more than labels. You can say whatever you want, but when that other person feels the energy going on, it's undeniable. it will create problems. And it's not just the existence of a friend, it's the behavior surrounding the friend, right? So if you're going to tell me for a dating and you're somebody new in my life that she is just a friend, she's attractive, you've got lots of similar interests, and you're going to tell me she's just a friend but you talk all the time, it's going to be a problem. The research shows it. Just remember, there are always exceptions to this, but I'm going with what the majority of what I've witnessed and experienced and read in data states. Another red flag: allowing and enjoying flirtation and not stopping it. So when you have a man or a woman who is serious about you, they protect the container even when you're not there, because they may not even behave like that in front of you. There may be no flirtation when you're there, but what happens when you're not there? You're not going to be keeping an eye on them all the time. That would be a lot of energy wasted. If they're soaking up that flirtatious energy and then blaming the other person, that is a choice. But why do some people let that happen? Do they need constant ego affirmation? Do they struggle with boundaries or confrontation? Do they still want that feeling of being single while having the benefits of being partnered? Let's go back to energy. Flirtation is energy exchange. Someone who casually invites it everywhere, they are saying, my sexual romantic energy is public domain. And yes, there is relevant psychology. Flirtation is a social mating behavior. It's associated with a mating signal. So don't sit there and tell me that it was harmless. Of course it's not. That's why it felt uncomfortable. It could be associated with status reinforcement or validation seeking. It could just reward that person with ego affirmation. And there is research that does show that people differ in perception of what counts as flirting. So what is the tolerance? What are you going to tolerate, before that jealousy is triggered? You could ask some questions. How do you distinguish politeness from reciprocal flirtation? And at what point does attention become participation? Would identical behavior from your partner feel neutral? Does allowing ambiguity serve a purpose? Sometimes we can feel like feelings are off, right? You don't know how to say it. Don't know if you should say anything. There's this intuition. There's this energetic incongruence. That divided attention dynamics. And even without observable violations, humans were highly sensitive to shifts in emotional investment and attentional energy. So yes, we may have that partner that we're in a new relationship with, that you'll start finding out there's a strong emphasis that they talk about having a very good friend. Maybe they're calling them all the time and they're just a good friend, right? Well, if that person's very attractive, they've got similar interests, and you're talking all the time, whether they're taken or not, the other individual, there's going to be an issue pop up whether you like to hear it or not. And if you question that person, that partner of yours, with these so-called friends, there may be an intensity or a defensiveness, right? You could ask, what differentiates a close relationship from an emotionally significant attachment? Does that frequency of contact alter relational meaning? And how do we detect when a connection carries more energy than it's labeled? But what about if the roles were reversed? Let's say I'm going out with somebody new and they've got a so-called friend. if they're keeping contacts of people in their phone that are known to be promiscuous. What if that was reversed? Would that perception change or not? These are just reflection questions. There's no accusation because, again, there are always exceptions, right? But ambiguity is rarely created by accident. It is usually tolerated because it provides some form of a psychological reward. And red flags are not about policing others. Gosh, that would be so exhausting. They are about seeing clearly who someone is and deciding if that path matches yours. Now, you can write a list. I've said this before in a previous episode about what you will not tolerate anymore and keep it rooted in self-respect and not bitterness. Does this person's relationship to temptation or exes or so-called friends and attention match the kind of love I am calling in? You are a temple, not an amusement park. The person you're meant for can close all doors, maintain clean, energetic boundaries, and meet you in a clear, dedicated container. And you can say this to yourself: I'm allowed to want a partner whose actions match exclusivity, sacredness, and respect, online and offline, seen and unseen. Red flags are not accusations, they're information. And compatibility is about shared standards, not control. It's about clarity. I know this episode was a lot shorter. I hope that it helped maybe put some things into perspective. We didn't really go in depth in this, but please do tell me, what have some of you tolerated? How do you feel about some of these red flags? Have you experienced them lately? Share your comments. Share your experiences. And until next time, take care.